What's going on?" I asked, scanning their smug faces, each one wearing an expression of satisfaction as they surrounded me. My in-laws leaned in, clearly savoring the moment, as though they had carefully rehearsed this scene. Finally, one of them spoke, their tone brimming with barely contained glee. "We need to have a serious talk." I took a steadying breath, keeping my voice calm. "All right, go on," I replied. My husband, Edgar, let out a heavy sigh, his eyes refusing to meet mine. "I sold the house to my parents," he said, his words deliberate, pausing before delivering the final blow. "And I think we should get a divorce." My in-laws exchanged triumphant glances, their smug expressions signaling some silent victory. Without hesitation, I slid the signed divorce papers out of my bag, placed my wedding ring on the table, and said evenly, "Then I guess I'll be leaving." They remained blissfully unaware of the storm they had just unleashed. My name is Madison, and I recently turned 50. Many years have passed since Edgar and I tied the knot. Our children are now grown and independent, living their own lives. Once I lived the life of an ordinary salaried worker, but now, thanks to a friend's introduction, I've turned my hobby into a profession. I teach handmade accessory crafting, and it has become a source of fulfillment. The joy of creating and connecting with my students has brought a fresh purpose to my life. Some might look down on turning a hobby into a career, but I feel content. Edgar and I met by chance at the company where I used to work. He was employed at a client company, and through work-related gatherings, our relationship grew. Eventually, we married for love. 3 years into our marriage, we were blessed with a healthy, vibrant son. He graduated from a prestigious university and is now happily married, living a successful life. Despite our son's achievements, the relationship between Edgar and me began to unravel. Over the years, Edgar changed. The once kind and considerate man I married became demanding, treating me like a housemaid rather than a partner. His constantly shifting preferences and unreasonable demands wore me down. Recently, his temper has grown shorter, blaming me for trivial issues, with verbal abuse becoming a regular occurrence. I've long dreamed of breaking free and starting over, but the unpaid mortgage tied me to our home. The house, however, is more than just property to me. It's my dream come true. I financed its reconstruction entirely on my own, saving bit by bit. Every corner reflects my aspirations, from the spacious kitchen to the smallest details I carefully selected. Edgar's involvement in the design was minimal, but even so, he criticized it endlessly. "This is a waste of money, just throwing it down the drain," he grumbled, sulking over the fact that his ideas weren't incorporated. Despite his complaints, I pressed on. The joy I felt when the house was finally completed was unmatched. But the construction cost far exceeded our estimates, forcing us to take on a larger loan than we had planned. Accepting such a significant financial burden in our 50s was daunting, but the promise of a happier life in our new home gave me the strength to persevere. Edgar, on the other hand, grew increasingly resentful. His behavior became childish, resorting to silent treatment and petty provocations. I often wondered when this Cold War would end. A few months after we moved in, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. As I prepared to answer, Edgar got up before me, something he rarely did. The voices that soon filled the entrance were unmistakable: my in-laws, Bradel and Emerson. Their presence immediately raised my guard. From the beginning, my relationship with them had been fraught. When Edgar and I announced our engagement, they made no effort to hide their disapproval, criticizing my lower social standing. Even on our wedding day, they maintained a cold and distant demeanor. Over the years, their interference in our lives persisted, adding tension to every encounter. This unannounced visit caught me off guard. I greeted them politely, but the air felt heavy with unspoken tension. Without so much as acknowledging me, they brushed past, their indifference cutting deeper than words. Something about this moment felt meticulously planned, and I knew I was about to face yet another calculated move in their ongoing campaign to undermine me. They brushed past me, barely acknowledging my presence, even bumping my shoulder as they moved through the house. Marveling at the spacious kitchen, they expressed envy, their eyes gleaming with approval. Edgar eagerly showcased every corner, beaming with pride, and when they returned to the living room, their faces carried a look of smug satisfaction. But then, Edgar's demeanor shifted, his expression hardened, and he barked at me, "Hurry up and prepare tea and snacks." Flustered, I rushed to comply, hastily serving them. Yet, my efforts didn't seem to meet their standards. "Is this the best you can offer?" Bradley muttered disdainfully. After finishing quickly, Bradley cast a glance around the house and, in an almost dismissive tone, remarked, "The interior is quite lovely." His focus seemed more on the design than the refreshments I had prepared. With a wide smile, Edgar extended an unexpected invitation to his parents. "Why don't you move in with us?" he offered, his tone light, as if my presence didn't factor into the decision. His parents exchanged pleased looks, nodded casually, and left soon after, their retreating figures leaving me in the doorway. Watching Edgar chat and laugh joyfully with them, a warmth I hadn't seen from him in years, I couldn't ignore the growing distance between us. Following that visit, Edgar's parents began coming over more frequently. Initially, it was a few visits each month, but soon it escalated to several times a week, until eventually their presence became a daily occurrence. Their criticisms, however, were relentless, and Edgar never intervened to defend me. On the contrary, he often joined in, accusing me of everything from neglecting our son to being the root cause of all our problems. Despite these endless complaints, I found myself unable to express my frustration. Instead, I resorted to apologizing, hoping to maintain peace. The situation worsened as their visits exceeded all reasonable boundaries. They began arriving during my absence, leaving clear signs of their intrusion: empty beer cans, bottles, and spills of alcohol that stained the new rug I had worked so hard to purchase. The house, once pristine, now carried a constant odor of alcohol and felt perpetually unclean. Adding to the chaos, Edgar, who contributed nothing to the household, became increasingly critical. His gambling habits added another layer of tension. Betting slips appeared regularly, and when I confronted him about the financial risks, his response was indifferent. "The money you're losing is hard-earned," I said one evening, trying to get through to him. But he simply shrugged and dismissed my concerns. The in-laws' invasions continued unabated. They specifically timed their visits to avoid me, but one day, I returned home earlier than expected and found them leisurely making themselves comfortable. Angered, I confronted them. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice trembling with frustration. They exchanged smug looks before one of them replied in a snide tone, "We were just visiting, dear. It's not like you're ever around." Their dismissive words and indifferent attitudes confirmed that they saw me as an inconvenience. Overwhelmed by the disrespect from Edgar and his parents, I realized I had reached my breaking point. Yet, rather than reacting emotionally, I resolved to come up with a plan to address the situation. One afternoon, when I was supposed to be out, the in-laws arrived unannounced. Surprised by their timing, I couldn't resist a sarcastic comment. "Well, isn't this a surprise? You only seem to visit when I'm gone." They ignored me, stepping boldly into the house. Edgar greeted them warmly, escorting them from the kitchen to the bathroom, showing off every corner. Their meticulous inspections gave me a sinking feeling that they had an ulterior motive. As they left, they exchanged satisfied glances, as if they had confirmed something important. "What was that all about?" I'd asked Edgar, trying to decipher his cryptic behavior. "None of your business," he replied curtly, brushing me off. His dismissive tone and evasive demeanor hinted at something sinister. Though I suspected manipulation, I couldn't yet pinpoint his true intentions. For now, all I could do was observe and wait. Then one day, after returning home from work, I was met with an unsettling sight: a moving truck parked in front of our house, its sides emblazoned with the name *Moving Center*. Edgar stood outside, deep in conversation with the driver and a few representatives. The moment he spotted me, he avoided eye contact and quickly disappeared inside. What shocked me more was the simultaneous arrival of my in-laws. They greeted me casually, their demeanor unnervingly calm, and Edgar welcomed them as if everything were perfectly normal. Inside, however, the house was anything but. The furniture and belongings I had grown familiar with were gone, replaced by outdated pieces that unmistakably belonged to my in-laws. Their furniture was arranged as though this had always been their home. Sitting on the unfamiliar sofa, I found myself surrounded by their smug faces. Their smirks conveyed triumph, as if they had orchestrated this coup long ago. Though anxious and unsure of what would come next, I decided to remain silent and wait for their next move. "We need to talk," one of the in-laws finally said, their tone almost dripping with glee. Bracing myself, I responded with faint calmness, "What is it?" Edgar sighed deeply, avoiding my gaze. "I sold the house to my parents," he admitted, watching for my reaction. Then, as if twisting the knife further, he added, "And I think we should get a divorce." His parents nodded in agreement, their smirks hinting at a plan they had carefully orchestrated. Despite the shock they likely anticipated, I remained composed. I had seen this coming. Calmly, I signed the divorce papers, placed my wedding ring on the table, and declared, "Then I'll be leaving the house." For some time, I had suspected Edgar's odd behavior and his parents' frequent, poorly timed visits when I wasn't home. To confirm my suspicions, I installed surveillance cameras around the house, synced to my smartphone. The first recordings revealed mundane interactions, but eventually, I stumbled upon footage that confirmed my fears. Edgar and his parents gleefully discussing selling the house behind my back. Shaken by this revelation, I devised a plan to protect myself. Using the information gathered, I took control of the situation. I initiated the transfer of the home loan from my name to Edgar's. If they wanted me out of the house, they would have to take full responsibility for the mortgage. The monthly mortgage payment of $1,900 had always come from my hard-earned salary. Knowing neither Edgar nor his parents could sustain such expenses, I resolved to cut all ties and let them face the consequences of their actions. Free from the toxic relationship, I moved into a new, thoughtfully arranged home filled with fresh furniture and the promise of a new chapter. One lazy afternoon, enjoying the rare luxury of sleeping in, I was startled by the abrupt chime of the doorbell. To my disbelief, Edgar and his parents stood at my doorstep, uninvited. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, blocking their entry. Without answering, they barged past me, spreading out a document on the table. "You changed the name on the house loan without our permission," Edgar accused, his voice filled with indignation. Barely concealing my exasperation, I replied, "Yes, I did. After all, you were the ones who wanted me out, weren't you?" Their faces fell as the reality sank in. They confessed they were unemployed and incapable of paying the hefty monthly mortgage. "We can't pay that amount," Edgar shouted, his frustration bubbling over. Attempting to educate them on the seriousness of their situation, I explained, "If you don't pay, the interest and late fees will pile up. The bank won't care about your excuses." Initially dismissive, Edgar's skepticism faded as he searched for answers online. His expression quickly shifted to one of panic and distress. "What are we going to do?" his mother muttered, her face pale with fear. I shrugged, keeping my tone neutral. "Maybe look for a job. It's time for a fresh start." The weight of their predicament was palpable. They'd admitted they had no savings or assets, while Edgar was buried in gambling debts with no stable income to support them. Desperation gave way to pleas for understanding. "We've been through so much together," Edgar said, trying to evoke sympathy. But his words fell on deaf ears. "I'm done," I said firmly, shutting the door in their faces. "You made your choice." Frustrated, they reported me to the police, but their complaint only led to their removal from my property. Financial struggles eventually forced them to relocate to a modest apartment on the outskirts of town. Edgar managed to secure a part-time job, scraping together enough to support his family. Meanwhile, my life flourished. I focused on my job and channeled my energy into a blog about handmade crafts, which quickly gained traction. The growing interest in my work doubled my income, and I began receiving requests to teach workshops and courses. I had no plans to remarry, content to navigate life on my own terms. One day, while tidying up, I came across an old household account book from the early years of my marriage. It brought back memories of our financial struggles, but rather than feeling sadness, I felt a sense of determination. Placing the account book back on the shelf, I smiled, ready to build my own happiness, free from the shadows of the past.